Welcome, friends. My name is Alcris Limongi, and as program staff, I greet you on behalf of the Center for Christian Studies. Welcome to this conversation of friends, of colleagues to mark Black History Month. In our panel or around the CCS table, online table, are women that are making history in the United and Anglican Church. In the Broadview interview in July 2022, they were introduced, some of them, the United Church group, were introduced as women that are breaking barriers in ministry. I'm going to introduce you to them. We have a group from the Anglican Church and one group, deacons from the Anglican Church, and diaconal, well, 2 diaconal ministers and a half from the United Church. So here they are in alphabetical order. Reverend Aldith Baker, and if you could please introduce yourself to us.
Yes, my name is Aldith Baker. I was born in Jamaica, in St. Catherine, and migrated to Toronto in 1970 with my 2 young sons. I was married in Toronto and gave birth to a 3rd child. Became a nurse when I was 43. I went back to school. And at 1996, I was identified and asked to join the Diaconal program and was ordained in 1996 by Victoria Matthews. So it's been quite a while for my journey as a deacon. I am currently licensed to St. Hugh and St. Edmund Anglican Church in Malton, Ontario. As I say, I winter it in Jamaica because my husband likes to live here. So where he goes, I go. That's about it. I have 3 grown sons and 9 wonderful grandchildren.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And you're very welcome.
Welcome.
Diane Dorca, she is in Winnipeg and she's a very close friend of CCS. She has served in the United Church of Canada for many years in different capacities. Co-chair of Pine and Prairies region, the Pine to Prairies region. She also was the chair of the program committee at the General Council office for 7 years, and I met you there, and now I re-encounter you here. And Lisa Byer-de Wever, she's serving at Merging Waters United Church in the west part of Quebec. She's the half, because she's still a student at CCS. She's in her final year, the integrative year. And she is in the west part of Quebec, and prior to that, she was the director of
St. Columba House.
St. Columba House. So next we have Marlene Britton. She was ordained in 2015. Currently, she's the team lead of the Office of Vocation in the United Church of Canada at the General Council office.
Alcris, no. I was ordained in 1995.
1995. And what did happen to you in 2015?
In 2015, I was admitted to the United Church of Canada.
Yes.
I was ordained as a diaconal minister in the Methodist Church in the Caribbean in 1995.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Thank you. That was all planned, you know. But she was admitted in the United Church, and she was born in Jamaica. And Lisa was born here. And we have with us Therese Samuel. She will lead us in the land. Oh, no, she will not. She's our tech today, along with Scott Douglas, our program coordinator. And even though she was a student at CCS for 1.5 years, and then she switched to ordained ministry. But she says she diaconal ministry is in her heart. And after serving congregational ministry for some years, now she is working as a right relations and justice for 3 regions in the Southwest Ontario. And she was born in Trinidad.
No, I wasn't.
No?
I was born in Estevan, Saskatchewan, Treaty 4 territory.
Oh, you were born there. Oh, okay. Well, that wasn't planned. We talked about Trinidad a lot, and maybe I got that from there. So the other participant she's not here with us. She couldn't make it today, but she's in our hearts. And that's Charmaine Bailey Fournier. She's the first diaconal minister commissioned in the United Church last year. And she's also a graduate from CCS. So now you have an idea about who is in our circle. And I want to thank the planning team, Lisa, Marlene, Diane, and Therese. So we want to open this time acknowledging the land and with a prayer. Diane, please.
Let us take a moment to remember that the land on which we live and work is land that carries treaty responsibilities, and for some of us is unceded indigenous territories. The Center for Christian Studies is located on Treaty 1 land, which is the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene people, and the homeland of the Red River Métis. We confess the sins of the past and seek reconciliation and reparation, and in that way show respect to the land and seek to live in peace and friendship with its people. And for those of you who are not on Treaty 1 land, and I noticed somebody started already, you could put the treaty that you're on in the chat box if you know it. Okay, let us pray. God of love, today we celebrate Black History Month. As we gather, we ask you to come to us now, as your son came to those first disciples on the lake shore, calling them into a beloved community of love and justice. We pray for your Spirit's presence, calling us to the same. Speak your peace and understanding to our hearts. Reveal yourself to us as we seek ways to sincerely worship together. May our time together bring a new sense of unity, binding us together in your love. You created all human beings in your image and likeness. Remind us that when we speak out for justice, mercy, and compassion, we are displaying the attributes we find in you. Show us how to respect your image in all human beings. Help us to defend your image that is found in all human beings. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Diane. And as we start, I invite you to write your name in the chat, and if you want to say where you are at, so we acknowledge your presence. So this is not an easy conversation. We acknowledge this. This is courageous, it's intentional, and it's an important conversation to have or to continue. It is courageous because there is a sense of vulnerability and at the same time urgency for truth to be addressed. And there are conflicting feelings, you know, like an unfinished grief or sadness, but there is also celebration, expectancy, and hope. So perhaps many of you or several are asking, are you wondering, is this a conversation about Black History Month, Diaconal, CCS, the UCC, or the ACC? Or is it about racism or an anti-racism practice? So anti-racism is not part of the Black history. Anti-racism is part of the story of all peoples who benefit from racism or who are oppressed by racism. But racism is one of the reasons that we need a Black History Month, and not a Black History Month only, but a Black History Day, 365 times a year. So when Black history is discussed, racism will be part of the conversation. So today we are decentering the conversation about diaconal ministry, and we come to the margins to reflect, to ask questions, share stories, and to dream together. So the context for this conversation tonight is that interview on Broadview magazine by Judy McGonigal to Lisa, Marlene, and Charmaine. Marlene, why is it important to follow up this interview?
I think it's critical that we follow up with a conversation such as this, to follow up that interview, because the intent of that interview when we conceptualized it was to start a conversation, not just to publicize the fact that there were only 3 Black women, or 3 Black persons in the diaconal stream of ministry in the United Church of Canada, but to have the conversations as to why that is so in 2023, what can be done about it, how do we dismantle barriers, how do we communicate this to folks in the pews, because ministers need to be raised up from there. That was another part of the conversation as well, as we pointed out that the 2 persons who are currently in the order of ministry as diaconal ministers are not from Canada. So as you heard, I'm from Jamaica, and Charmaine, who isn't here, is originally from Antigua. Lisa, who is the half, is from Canada. And we're wondering, why is it that there are not more persons from Canada who are Black, especially in areas such as Toronto and Nova Scotia, or the other areas which have large populations of Black folk who I am guessing might be adjunct members of the United Church of Canada. So herein lies the urgency for this conversation. How do we move it to the next level?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And because we will deepen on what you just mentioned, but because we have friends from the Anglican Church that were not in that interview, we would like to ask what brought you to diaconia? Let us hear a little bit of why did you choose diaconal ministry in particular?
Asking here, Aldith. Okay.
I did not choose, it chose me. So as a cradle Anglican, I was always very involved in my church from Jamaica, as well as when I migrated to Toronto. And one day my priest said to me, Father John Whittle, he said, Aldith, I've been praying. And I thought very flippantly, I'm glad you've been praying. He said, I've been praying for a deacon, and every time I pray, your name comes to mind. Mm-hmm. So I sat down very quickly and I said, uh-oh, not for me, never hit my radar. And he said, take as long as you need to pray about it and think about it. It took me 3 to 6 months. And one day in my living room after church, my youngest son, who was then just about 16, he said to me, Mom, every Sunday sit here praying, asking God for an answer. But I don't think you're listening. He's already giving you the answer. And I thought, out of the mouth of babes. At that point, I knew what the answer was. I think I've always, because I'm a nurse, and nursing is part of the caring profession, I think that's what attracted most people to what I do, because I was always caring for people and for my community. It did not matter to me what race or creed they were, whether they were male or female, whether they were bisexual or not bisexual or whatever. I just cared. And so I never questioned that aspect of my gift from God. And so that's how come I got into the Diaconal ministry.
Thank you. And how does your identity and experience as a Black person has been a gift or a challenge in your choosing diaconal ministry?
Both gift and challenge. It has been a gift because I'm Jamaican and I'm somewhat used to using my mouth. I'm not afraid of speaking my truth. And that also is a challenge because quite often I was expected to just sit down and shut up. It was a challenge because I was raised up in a almost all white parish. There's only 2 families or 3 families that were Black at the time. And so 88% voted for me to become a deacon, and the rest who didn't vote were actually the Blacks.
Oh,
And they were very vocal about it. They were quite mean, actually. Some of the challenges I've faced is some of the echelons of the Anglican Church who did not approve of my ethnicity or my fact that I was female, did not approve of the way I was dressed. So, I think I was a token, but I accepted the token because I felt that it was better to be at the table so I could blaze the way for others than not to be there. And so now we currently have 3 deacons that are Black. We had 4 at one time. We lost one because she died from cancer, but we currently have 3, and we're still hoping, we're hopeful that there will be more in the future. It's been slow coming. I believe I may have been the first Black Anglican deacon. So it has its challenging time. It does have its rewards.
Yeah. And you have been a path opener for many, and so all those who are here in this panel. And if I open that question to all of you, how being a Black person and a Black woman has been a gift, or what gift do you offer to the church, and what challenges have you found?
I'm the only one present at the moment. Claudette is ill because she said she has a really bad migraine. And Judy, her family did a surprise family day at her home. So she's in the middle of dinner with her family. So we did have a little chat last night, 3 of us on Zoom. We talked about the challenges. I don't want to speak them, but I think they face similar challenges. Judy did face similar challenges to myself in regard to the fact that she was female. Education is a problem because when I was identified, there was a choice that you did not have to have a degree. And I don't have a degree, neither myself or Judy. Claudette does, though it has a master's degree in theology. It now seems to be the way that if you don't have a degree, then you don't seem to be recognized and treated with the same level of respect as the ones that do. So for me, I think that if I was to encourage other Black females or male to become, I would tell them, go get your degree if you can.
Come to CCS.
So,
Come to CCS, yes. And Lisa and Marlene.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up after Aldith, simply because she mentioned a few things that I know will be very shocking for folks in this circle to hear, that the same thing happens in the United Church of Canada. I know.
Oh,
But I see deacons are, diaconal ministers are present here, so you might not be as shocked. But whilst as a diaconal minister, I have found that it was definitely, although it is one order of ministry and two streams. So diaconal stream and the ordained stream. However, on the ground, there is still a perception that the diaconal ministers are a little less than the ordained minister. And I have said this in other areas where I remember being affirmed for the work that I'd done in a particular area of ministry, but then I was moving to the office of vocation, and there was angst and there was a little bit of upset. And the point was made that if I was a real minister, I wouldn't have been coached in that way. So yeah, for me, for not being a real minister. But I also want to point out that being Black and being so like Aldith and Jamaican, and again, I've said this before, I have a challenge being quiet in situations in which I find myself. Yes. I have a challenge being not taking up space and recognizing that I did not transfer to the United Church of Canada until 2015. I started working in the United Church of Canada in 2013, was admitted in 2015. At that time, I had already served 20 years in ministry in the Methodist Church in the Caribbean and the Americas, which meant I had served all of my ministry up to that point as a diaconal minister in countries which are Black. I didn't work in any white countries. So it was a challenge for me to come into a country that is Caucasian, that is using the word dominant space, and literally to be treated as something that is lesser than. I was in my 40s. I didn't understand how I was supposed to not look people in the eye. I was not supposed to walk erectly. That's the only way I know how to be. That's how I was raised. That's how I was for more than 40 years. What do you mean I can't? And that was a challenge, not just for folks in the wider society, but for folks in the United Church of Canada. I'm sure none of you here. Yes, no. Just checking who's here. Yeah. Not for anybody here, but definitely it was a challenge for persons to appreciate that not just as a Black person, but as a Black person who was from an area where we were empowered in who we are. It was hard for some folks to get that and to recognize that I'm not being uppity, I'm just being me. And I have gifts and graces, and I want them to continue to be used by the church. Aldith, it's interesting because in the article from Broadview, I don't know if anybody else here read it, I was asked the question, why did you choose diaconal ministry? And they said, I didn't choose it, it chose me. So when you said that, I laughed. I've also been to St. Hugh's and St. Edmunds in August of last year, 2 Sundays, and heard you preach. I knew you didn't recognize that, but I was there and heard you. So yes, I'll invite Lisa to give her piece.
Where do you begin? So I will start by saying, me too, I did not choose diaconal ministry, it chose me. But the church had a hard time recognizing that. And at the time we were in the structure where there were E&S committees, and they would have none of it. I was really strongly encouraged, and I'm putting that mildly, to go the ordained route. because diaconal ministry wasn't even a thought. It wasn't an option. It wasn't real ministry. And I could name all the lovely words that were used to describe diaconal ministry. And it didn't feel right. And by chance, by God's chance, someone said, you know, before you take the next step, I know this diaconal minister. So I went and sought her out, and then I knew where I was being called. When you talk about challenges, I guess I bring a unique perspective of being part of diaconia, being Black, being a woman, being an English-speaking person in Quebec, and a deacon. I think it gives me a unique perspective to engage the world and engage the church. It kind of always reminds me to see not only the voices that are missing and not only who should be at the table, but how do we build the table together? The challenges of the United Church in terms of recognizing diaconal ministers are many and on many levels. And I think we're going to touch a bit on it later, but educating from the ground up what this stream of ministry has to offer the church. But in terms of recognizing ministry as a person of color, training our MNPs, training our boards, training all circles of our church to understand racism in all its shapes and forms. And I'm not talking about the overt, blatant racism that's in your face, even though we do get that too, but I'm talking about the unconscious biases that people hold, how people are uncomfortable when you bring up the word racism, and how much easier it is in this dominant society to camouflage that under different types of experiences and not to name what's really happening. Similar to Marlene, I have a hard time keeping my opinions to myself when these type of situations occur, but it comes at a cost. It comes at a cost both professionally and deeply personally. But I do have incredible hope for this type of ministry, and particular for that added layer of being a woman, being Black, and being English in Quebec. And that particular perspective, I believe, shapes how I engage the world and the church in a way that brings closer our beloved shalom that we've been looking for.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry. I did not know that the United Church had deacons. So
You're not the only one. A lot of people don't.
As a matter of fact, I have a guest in my house right now who's a United Church member from Toronto, and he says they don't have any deacons in the United Church.
We have diaconal ministers and ordained
Really?
in the order of ministry. Yeah, there are two streams. The name is different,
That's
but
good.
yeah.
Yes, but if that
You know,
person is a United Church person, yeah, it's
Yeah.
ordained ministers and diaconal ministers. Don't tell
know
me
that.
priests or deacons. We have ordained, and I'm speaking from the Office of Vocation here. Yes, we have ordained ministers and diaconal ministers in
Didn't
the
know that.
United Church of Canada. Yep.
Now in the
Marlene.
Anglican Church, we have the bishop, the priest, and the deacons, three distinct orders.
Mhm.
We're supposed to be treated with equal respect when we are together or when we are separate, but not the same.
Mhm.
Not. Yeah.
Marlene, do you have at hand the numbers in the United Church?
Yes, I do. And I
Uh-huh.
double checked them today. So there are 304. Is he hearing you, Aldith? There are
Yeah.
304 diaconal ministers right now in the United Church of Canada. There are 3,538 ordained ministers.
Well,
So,
I know about the minister, just didn't know about the deacon, but thanks for that information.
yeah,
Mhm.
and we're all termed ministers. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
So you have a lot more
And-
than the Anglican Church has.
Yeah. Right, and of the 304, 3 are Black, yeah.
Yeah.
So 8.59% of ordered ministers are diaconal.
Mhm.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Marlene. We can jump to now that you started talking about how the church perceives diaconal ministry, and maybe people who are listening can also add their comments in the chat if they want. So that perception of a lesser kind of ministry, or a ministry that is in the margins, how does that happen? Like, where does it sit? It is in the congregations, it is in the structure, it is in the perception of, for example, just individual people that still in these changing times are considering one better than the other. I have heard that the academic is also a factor, which I think is not well informed. Does anybody has something to say?
I think the clergy, I'm speaking for the Anglican Church here, the clergy have a problem. And my problem with that is that a lot of the clergy are afraid that deacons could be mini priests, that we might threaten their jobs. So prior to my ordination 20 years ago, or 22 years ago, deacons that they had then that were ordained were able to do funerals, baptism, and marriage. When I was ordained as one of 4, but after 20 years of no ordination of deacons, we were the first 4, and we were not allowed to do marriages. Now, that's fine with me. I'm not looking to be a priest, so that's okay. But it is just that I found that some priests were not comfortable having a deacon in their parish because they felt that they might lose their jobs to us. We might be replacing them. Some bishops just didn't like how we looked. Most bishops that I met were supportive and seemed to have understood what the diaconal role was and what our function was, and it was important in the church. The members of the church, some just didn't understand what it was all about. So it meant we had to do a lot of teaching.
Yeah, so education is a big part of what is still needed.
Yes.
We have Jan saying, I think this is a question of educating people about the differences between diaconal and ordained ministry. I was wondering if we are, especially in areas like Toronto and Vancouver and Nova Scotia, the Black population is, I think it's 8.2, or maybe larger than that. And if we have people being in admissions, why diaconal ministry is not an option in the Black community? Do you think that this is misperception, or is that we in the United and in the Anglican Church were not doing a well-informed and recruitment or teaching or having diaconal ministry at the same level when people are wanted to be a candidate. And what do we need to do? Like,
Yeah, so I'll just throw a few things here. One of the things that I'm sure you've heard, I'm sorry the light is not, clearly not in my office, but anyway, representation matters. And we've heard this in several spaces as we've talked about race and that sort of thing. So being able to see that there are Black diaconal ministers in service in diaconal ministry, because that's the other thing, right? Diaconal ministers sometimes get pigeonholed into the roles, the same roles as the ordained ministers. So that's one, to be able to see the folks who are there and who are working and recognize that folks like you are out there. That's one. Second piece is to recognize that there is a significant difference in the roles, in the training, in the education of diaconal ministers in the United Church of Canada. In any sphere, because mine is also different, but fine, in the United Church of Canada, and to recognize that the role of CCS is also being seen differently by the United Church of Canada, at least at the denominational level. So it is being seen, and this is not tales out of school, this was discussed at GC 44 and then at GCE again, that the model of education that is used by CCS and the Atlantic School of Theology are the models that make education available and accessible to a wider sphere of people, removing some of the barriers which some of our other traditional, or just let's say some of the other theological schools have. And CCS is now being encouraged, right, Alan? And being upheld as one of the spaces where folks who are seeking to offer ministry should look first. Yeah, so hopefully as the GCE with its new, and the GCO with its strategic plan, as we're looking in that direction and seeing that the way we have to operate in this world now means that this model of ministry is the one that is going to take us into the areas that we need to go. Okay, so fine, the church at this level recognizes it. Here we get the education piece again, which is part of what diaconal ministry enables us to do, to bring people into the spaces where we recognize that they need to be, and to do it in a way that brings them from where they are into where they need to be, that kind of thing. And I know, yes, folks don't know that diaconal ministers are, what does being on the margin mean? That we're trained to offer specialized ministries, to offer ministries in specific areas of need, and to morph into the areas. So our action reflection models, our circles, or all of this help us to be able to get into the niches that folks who are trained in other ways might find it a little bit more challenging to do. Was that diplomatic enough, Janet?
I'm gonna add to that. Sorry, Alcris. I'm gonna add to what Marlene said, and I think it's a two-tiered approach, right? So we're talking about educating our institutions on this new model of education, which is vital and crucial to diaconal ministry. But there's also the education of the people on the ground who are discerning and accompanying people who are looking at ministry as a possibility. And if they aren't equipped with, what is diaconal ministry versus traditional ordained, that's one thing. But where are the people of inspiration, right? So who do I look to who is Black, English, and a diaconal minister? Well, there's 2.5 of us in all of Canada, right? So there are many layered approach to answer this question. And I know we're going to get a little bit more into it, so I'm going to refrain from everything that's going on in my head.
So whose job is this? Is this CCS? It is the 2.5 diaconal ministers, is the 3 or 4 Black deacons in the Anglican Church. Whose job is this?
It's all our jobs. It is all our
I
jobs.
was just going to say,
Yeah. So again, from the point of the Office of Vocation, we are responsible for the training of ministers. So yes, we have that remit. So it means that when we're looking at what our needs are, what we are going to be asking our theological schools to concentrate on, what do we hope to have when somebody's given testimony that the theological school says they're ready for ministry, what does that mean? And all those kinds of conversations are part of our job as those who are preparing the candidates for ministry. Fine, that's the official piece. But before they get there, then those who are accompanying them, those who are helping them to discern, those who are their friends and neighbors, those who are in the congregations, communities of faith with them, on the ground, those who are friends and families, it's everybody's job, yeah? And especially if the person is Black. There are so many other things that have to be put into that person's wheelhouse to be able to navigate ministry in Canada and in the United Church of Canada. We're a great church, but we have a little bit of work to do, a little bit. Yes, allies and those folks are key, are so key. And recognizing too, and it's not a stereotype, but there does tend to be a challenge with some of our Black folk who can't afford to pay for the theological education, right? So
that's
just
key.
putting, all right, so
That is key, yeah.
okay, just put that out there as well. There's a little bit of a disadvantage in terms of our economic powers as well, right?
And there's
It's
the
uncomfortable to talk about, but it's there.
There's the
When you
accessibility. Oops,
Lisa.
sorry, go ahead, Aldith.
When you think of how many young Black females or male that are raising a family, and in the secular world, they're barely managing to support a family, and they might want to go into ministry, how can they afford to go and seek the extra education they need in order to do ministry? You see, it is very difficult. Where are they going to get the funds from? There are no scholarships put aside for us.
Mm-hmm. And
Now,
as I was sharing with in another context that it's hard, right, for us to hear this, but a Black person and a white person walking into a bank to seek funding,
to get a loan,
the floor is not equal.
Not equal, no. Definitely not.
And the third piece is, how do our learning institutions respond to the fact that there needs to be an alternative method of engaging in learning, right? A Black person who may have had traumatic experiences in learning because of the fact that they are Black doesn't usually come into a conversation in any learning institution. How do our theological schools engage that part of the conversation?
And also, one of the uniqueness of a Black or minority perspective is the fact that a Black person knows what is being in the margins, what happens there, how navigate or have experienced marginalization, that walk in the bank and not getting the funding as easy, and being, not acknowledge the experience in a different country, in a different context. I think those are gifts for diaconal ministry. To be able to work in the margins, to offer that pastoral care and teaching and encouragement and justice to people who are in the fringes of society. And sometimes that is not valued. It's seen, as something that is not important, or is hindered or something for ministry. So thank you, Marlene, for addressing, on all of you, the economic barrier. What other barriers do you see for Black folks to see themselves in this stream of ministry, or to even consider diaconal ministry or becoming a deacon as a possibility for their ministry? It's funny because once people understand, like I have heard that many times, when people are encounter the definition of diaconal ministry, the response is always, "That's me."
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Yeah, the other barriers, yeah.
So Lisa, sorry. Yeah.
I think we mentioned a couple of them. Educating from the ground up, educating groups that accompany discernment, different models of learning incorporated into our curriculums in our theological schools. So I think all of those can be barriers on why Black people are not entering this stream of ministry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then just thinking about literally the ground, on the ground. So are there any Torontonians in the house?
Yeah.
It's not a rhetorical question. Raise your hands if you.
No.
Yeah.
Go ahead and talk.
No, I asked the question deliberately because there was a shooting, violence alert here, in high school this past couple of days, Jean and Lawrence, and that was just north of me, which is Weston and Lawrence. So literally close to where I live. I could picture the area and everything into that. I was here in Jamaica. And that was not the first time somebody's killed in the middle of the intersection at Lawrence and Weston, but it's a very Black area, right? So when you have it, so this is the other reality, yeah? These are the folks that, and I'm going to name a church, Central United Church, which is in Weston, right there on Weston Road and Church Street,
Mhm.
is in the midst of that. So anybody who goes to that church and is Black is also exposed to those realities. Yeah. Are we ready for, and do they think that we are ready for them? Because they're still considered them. So one of the realities of barriers that I see in our church, in our United Church, that I absolutely love, is that we're not there. We, Black folks, are not there. And I don't know how we get rid of that barrier, that we're not there. So that church that I mentioned, and I can say it because I've gone there, and the first time I went there was a challenging experience. And I didn't go back until I was asked to preach at a covenanting service there. And I was welcomed profusely. And I said, this is the second time I've been here. And they go, what? Yeah, there was a reason I didn't come back. And that church, and yes, I said it, and it led to a conversation with the mission committee and with the chair of the board and so on. So it had an effect, and I was willing to work through with them. How many more of our churches are like that? That we're right in the middle of a very Black area. We ain't in the church. And even when I walk in, I didn't walk in and say who said who I was. It's like I went to Aldith's church and I never told her who I was. I just sat down, but I don't have to. I shouldn't have to say who I am or walk in the next time fully vested. So then it's a difference in how I'm responded to. That is a huge barrier. Because the Black folks aren't in the church. So are they going to be in ministry? One of our requirements for ministry is that you have to be associated with the United Church of Canada for 2 years. We can do a thing, You can start talking with the vocational minister and so on, but you still need to be there for 2 years. How are they going to, if they're not in there? How do we break that barrier? I don't want to say we're a white church.
You don't have to say it.
But how do so when we have that conversation in our groups or next, that's the question I'm inviting folks to think about. How do we change that little bit of mindset so we become a little bit more inclusive? We are an inclusive church, but then why aren't we there? Yeah.
I think Jan asked a really great question, which I think is where we're going, right, Alcris?
Yes.
Yeah. Marcy has her hand raised. Yeah.
Yes. Marcy.
So I had a question as you were talking, Alcris, about why people are why people who are Black might be going into diaconal ministry or not, and how do they make that choice and such. And I was curious whether Therese might speak to a bit about her experience about being in the diaconal stream for some of the time and making a change, and what some of her experience was around that, and what does it mean to be somebody who's still carrying a diaconal heart as an ordained person.
I have not included Therese in the conversation because she asked us, she wants to be focused on the technical. But if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, I can speak. And myself to the spotlight. Yeah, so why I ended up not continuing the diaconal stream really was that I at one of the learning circles we were learning about the polity, and it was the candidacy process, and they were talking about our final interviews and what would be important to us in the ministry that we ultimately went into. And I was thinking, you know, wherever I go, worship and sacraments needed to be part of it. That sacrament was a key part of my sense of call to ministry. And I knew at that time that there were some conferences that had never granted a license to diaconal ministers to administer the sacraments. And so I realized, you know, I pictured myself in the interview and having the people saying, well, but we have you down for diaconal ministry. And so it was that one piece of knowing that part of ministry, which is recognized and respected for diaconal ministers in many parts of the United Church, that in other parts it's not. So that was when I discerned that I needed to make the switch. And I will say that CCS, the teaching staff at CCS, the program staff at CCS, had an awareness of racism and groundedness in that conversation that I did not find outside of CCS. So being out of CCS, I had a chance to experience the oppression that, I mean, the United Church can and often does act as an oppressive machinery. I experienced that very, very clearly in my candidacy process after I left CCS, and I know I would have been shielded from that within CCS. So there's, I mean, there's an upside to that, but then there's the flip side that I also recognize that it's a challenge if that awareness isn't being made apparent. And you know, very shortly after I switched streams, and for me it was very, I had enough of a grounding in CCS and in the diaconal formation to really understand what diaconal ministry was about, and to know that at the core of my ministry, you know, working in team and working on connecting the world outside the church with the world inside the church is very much a part of who I am in ministry. And also I recognize that the CCS give much more training on sacraments than what I got in my my seminary life. And so I have an awareness of diaconal ministry. When shortly after I switched, I met somebody who was an ordained minister, and it said I was a candidate, and that, you know, I had been in the diaconal stream and discerned, and I need to switch to the ordained stream. And he said, immediately said, congratulations. I just looked at him, and there I could see his eyes going, oh, I don't think I should have said that. But that sense of, you know, it was like, now you're going to real ministry. No.
Yeah.
But that belief is so strong and so pervasive. I have an opportunity in ordained circles as an ordained minister. I have a voice to challenge that. And I am so grateful. There's so many ways that I know that I'm ministering the way that I minister because of what I got from CCS. So I hope that answered your question, Marcy. Thank you for asking. I'll go back to being a techie.
Thank you, Marcy and Therese. I wonder two things from what you have said, and I will acknowledge some of the chat messages. But one is, Lisa, as a CCS student, how does the educational process meet the needs of Black students? Have you had a chance to explore your racial identity, how that has empowered you or disempowered? How can you?
That is such a big question, Alcris. Let me try and unpack that a bit. So in terms of identity, actually, I can honestly say that CCS gave me my voice in terms of my identity. So when I didn't necessarily have the tools or the articulation to be able to name things, CCS gave me that opportunity not only to explore it, but to be able to bring it to the forefront in a way that was accessible. And that's a big piece, you know, as a racially mixed person who's navigated the white and Black my whole life. There were many parts around my identity as a Black woman that have either been dismissed or camouflaged, or, you know, and the list goes on and on. So I'm really grateful to CCS for creating a space where I could make that journey myself. In terms of education, I believe I've been very blessed with the incredibly creative staff that I've been journeying with since a couple of years now in making the curriculum accessible. So I do believe CCS has a lot to offer the wider church, both in terms of specifically diaconal ministry, but any stream of ministry, because the way it engages in its reflective model, the way it engages in the world is one that is accessible. It doesn't matter where you find yourself on a stream of learning, on a stream of marginalization, on a stream of identity, on a stream of, right? They get to where you're at. And sometimes that's an uncomfortable thing, but it's a good thing. It has helped me find my voice and be able to be proud of not only my learning journey, but what I bring as a Black diaconal English-speaking woman.
Thanks, Lisa. I want to go back for a moment to what Marlene commented on that church in Toronto. And that brings me to think about welcoming. We are a church that is engaged in becoming intercultural. We are taking steps to be anti-racist. We are inclusive. We are welcoming. So what do you think can we do to deepening that welcoming? Is there a conditional welcoming, welcome, but, or what can we do to embrace a community of difference as we have many? So let us focus on welcoming, welcome, because this is something that is at every level, but especially on the ground.
Mhm.
And everybody's welcome to express your thoughts about a deeper welcoming, or how do we welcome, or do we really welcome?
While Marlene's thinking, the first thing that comes to mind, Alcris, is yes, you're welcome, but don't use that music. You're welcome, but you're really difficult to understand. I don't understand your accent. You're welcome, but maybe you can change your appearance a bit for this event. So I think acknowledging the differences and moving from tolerance to celebration would be an aspect of welcoming that we could all reflect on.
Thanks. Yeah, to move from tolerance, that's very important, to celebrate and really understand and value what a different perspective and experience and upraising brings. Jan says that it would be important for CCS and the UCC to be more involved with each other to address what sounds like differences, acceptance of each other as ministers. And Alan, our director, yes, need to work together. People who are leading the sermon gatherings need to know better what CCS is about. So that's something concrete as well. And how can us white folks help support Black folks who may want to pursue the type of ministry? And also Marcy talked about becoming allies.
Yeah, so I responded to that question specifically in the chat and talked about becoming an ally or becoming an advocate. They're two very separate things, and two things that are needed by Black folks in ministry, in ordained ministry in the United Church of Canada. You do need allies who will be being supportive and helping and holding up your hands in the biblical sense, and all of that. You need allies, and those allies are separate and distinct from your advocates, who are going to be the ones out there fighting for you. Because I will tell you upfront, point blank and straight, because that's the only way I know how to talk about it. If I didn't have white people supporting me in this ministry, in this United Church of Canada, I wouldn't be here. If I didn't have people like Marcy, and I can specifically say Marcy, even though I'm not a CCS graduate, because as you heard, I was ordained long ago. I started ministry when I was 5. So I'm not a CCS graduate. I'm a graduate of another seminary and came to Canada, but folks like Marcy and Linda Irvin and those have been my allies. And then I've had people who have been advocating for me. And they have to be white folks. Because they are the folks who people are going to listen to. They're not going to listen to me. And I recognize that. I have gifts and graces, but I will come with a great idea or with a plan to go forward, and somebody else will come with the same plan and say it in the same words I just used, because I can navigate the English language pretty well, I think. And they are heard and I am not. So it's not until I've had advocates who have been able to force the issue in the spaces where they have the voices, where you, Jan, have the voice, where you have the privilege. And if you're willing to foist that privilege and to use it, so that folks who are working and are wanting to be part of the structure, that is critical. We can't do it without, absolutely. So I'm not here bashing the church. I would never do that, not from where I'm sitting. As I say, I absolutely love this church, and I can't do it. I couldn't do it without having white folks in my corner.
Aldith is saying that we not only need more allies, but we also need to accept our allies and advocates.
Mhm.
And that's the other side of the coin.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Agree.
yes.
And there's a whole course about being allies and allyship and that sort of thing, because you want to be allies without causing any further harm, and else it's yes,
Yeah.
but absolutely important.
Yeah, so
I'm
we
gonna shut
need
up now.
collaboration and work together, and also deepening our understanding what becoming an ally is, and also an advocate, and the institutions work together and have the courage to speak through the structures in any space where we are located, and encourage the Black community to learn about what a deacon and diaconal ministry is, and how much that is necessary. We have just a few minutes, well, 15 minutes left. I want to invite you to say your comments, or maybe to go in small groups, breakup groups of 3, and reflecting on the question, what can we do? Because this is, like, they had the interview in July, now we are observing, we're reflecting, and we're taking action by doing this conversation, having this conversation. So from here, what do we hear? What do we reflect about? And what is the next step? And if you had any aha moment, or I knew it.
Yeah, any further on this journey since the Reverend Wilbur Howard?
Yes.
We have, in that we can now find appointments, because like he couldn't find one. So that there is that little piece, but it is challenging to find the appointments. And we have a few more hurdles to jump. Can you imagine? Sorry, I shouldn't say like that. For instance, being asked the question, did you have to learn English when you came here? Anyway.
What do we do next? And my thoughts were that we should form an association, that we would have more of a voice if we were a group. And we'd be able to support each other and support other people who probably want to become deacons better if we were an association.
You mean like a conversation or a group from the United Church and Anglican Church, Black, Diaconal, from the 2 denominations?
Yes.
Well, that's a concrete step as well. One more. And if Lisa and Marlene and Aldith want to say something else to wrap up, you're welcome. Okay. So thank you so much for your participation, for doing amazing active listening, for reflecting and having already some thoughts about concrete steps. You are invited for next Monday. Next Monday, the celebration continues, but in a different fashion. We will celebrate the African/Caribbean heritage in the diaspora. So we will have like an expo experience where there will be food and music and drink, beverage, and storytelling and a few more things. So you're welcome to attend. And I thank you also the planning team and our speakers for tonight.
You're welcome. Thanks for organizing this.
Blessings.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Alcris. Nice seeing you.
Nice to see you, Gloria.
Yeah, thank you,
Night,
Alcris, for
Alcris.
pulling us
Night,
all together.
everybody.
Bye.
Faye.
Good night.
Night, night.